Is single family rental property still a good investment today? I get asked this quite frequently, especially where house prices are the highest they've ever been. So I want to talk about it. People say, hey, prices are the highest ever. What happened during COVID? What about inflation? What about interest rates? What about a recession? These are all things that make people think, oh no, should I really be investing today? And here's the first thing I want to tell you is when I bought properties and I got started, the prices were the highest that they'd ever been. Okay. This is back in 2000, right here. You can see on the graph here, 2000 prices were the highest they had ever been. I had the exact same concerns. Okay. Are prices going to go up? Is this a stupid investment? Whatever the case is. So what I realized is even if the values didn't go up, which I thought they probably would because historically they had been going up, if I could just get the tenant to pay off my loan and then I could have a free and clear property 30 years from now, that alone would be worth it because of the cash flow I would get. So, but I can tell you that's not the only thing you'll get. I went and saw this property. I was scared to buy this property. I almost did not purchase this property because I was too afraid we were overpaying. We paid $350,000 and I think we put $50,000 or $100,000 into it. No longer than 10 years later, that house sold for $1.2 million. And I didn't spend a bunch more money on the property. It went up drastically during that time. But here's what I can tell you. At the time, I was worried, will it go down even more? Will it get even worse? It went from, 245 to 200. It went down 20%. Is it going to go down another 20%? That risk, that fear is always there. And so the way you look over that is you look historically and you can get a good idea of what's happened. If you take a trend line from 1965 until now, you will see that real estate has always gone up over the 5-year period. It may go down for a few years, but always comes back up. We see it time and time and time again. Are prices the highest? Well, I bought when prices were the highest and they've gone even higher. And I thought that in 2008, they would go even lower. And I still bought properties because I knew in the long run, as long as I could get that house paid off with my tenant paying that or putting a little extra towards it, 30 years from now, then I would have a free and clear property and I would have rent coming in and that alone would be worth it. And it's worth more because of supply and demand, because of cost, because of everything else. And so you're seeing that that's an ongoing thing. So you're always going to be asking yourself, are these prices are just the highest they've ever been? Don't let that stop you from investing because they're typically always going to be the highest they've ever been. Or if they're not, they're going to be in a slump and you're going to be worried they're going to go even lower. And then you'll say, hey, I don't want to buy because I think prices are going to get lower. The very best thing that you can do is dollar cost average. They do this in stocks, which means you buy a house on a regular basis. You buy properties once a year or every 2 years, and you continually buy properties. So if you buy some at really low and you buy some at really high, your average is somewhere in the middle. And then as long as you have the staying power to keep those properties for 20 or 30 years, that's when it starts to pay off. Because keep in mind, each month that you're making that payment, it's paying down your mortgage just a little bit. So even if you're not making money from the rents versus your expenses, it is paying down your loan and you've got the potential for appreciation and you've got the potential for rent increases. And that's the other thing I want to talk about here. We see rents go up over time. It makes sense. Now, what about inflation? People say, hey, inflation's going crazy. Inflation is it cost me $1 to buy a can of milk last week, and now this year it cost me $2. So there's been a huge inflation on that. What does it cost for the same goods and services that you were paying? Well, the great thing about inflation is helpful for real estate investors. If inflation is going up, property values also are going up. And I can tell you historically, inflation is going to happen. The cost of goods and services is continuously going to rise. You've seen it time and time again. Inflation's a good thing if you own real estate. Now, what about interest rates? Well, when I bought my first property, one of my first properties, rates were like 8 or 8.5%, okay? And that was a pretty good deal at the time. And so we've been spoiled for a long time to have interest rates significantly lower than that. But I see people saying, hey, it might not be a good time to invest in real estate because interest rates are 6.25%, and before they were 3%. So, I need to wait until interest rates go down. Well, that's a problem because as interest rates go down, house prices typically you're going to go up, right? Because it comes to the buying power. So one of the strategies you can do is buy the property at the 6% rate, get a 30-year fixed loan, and then when rates go down, refinance the loan and get that lower interest rate. As a matter of fact, you don't have to refinance for another 30 years and reset it. You can refinance for 15 years, or you can refinance for 20 years. So you can do things along that, or you can refinance for 30 years and then just pay extra towards it to pay down that property because you're trying to compound and get these paid off as soon as possible. So regardless of interest rates are 10% or they're 3%, it's still a great time to buy real estate. What I will tell you is when you're buying at these higher interest rates, you're probably getting a better deal. So if I can buy it and I can have the staying power to hang on to that and not get myself in trouble with it, then when interest rates come down, I just have a massive increase in cash flow and I have a massive increase in value because I bought it at a good time when property values were lower because the interest rates were higher. And then when interest rates go down, I can refinance, take advantage of that lower interest rate, but I'm also taking advantage of the value. I bought it a great deal and now it's worth significantly more. So that's the other thing. And then we can talk about recessions, right? What happens when there's a recession? Well, we just did when we talk about that 2008, the worst real estate recession of all time, 2008, you can see rental prices went up and you can see that property values went down about 20%. And they were back up within about 4 years. Within about 4 years after they still came back up to where they were before. So if you bought at the peak 4 years later, it was back historically, and now it's significantly higher. It's 30 or 40, maybe 50% higher. That is where it's at right now. So there's always going to be a reason, man, should I really be buying single family real estate today? And the answer is yes, you should be, regardless of prices, regardless of COVID, regardless of inflation, regardless of interest rates, regardless of recessions, you should be buying single family real estate today. The other big thing I want to talk about, we've talked about rents increasing over time. We've talked about values increasing over time. The other thing to really keep in mind is that housing is a basic human need. This is one of the reasons why I don't buy super high-end houses. I buy your mom and pop little houses, 4 bedrooms, 2 baths that work for a normal size American family or household. And that's what I like to do because I get people that stay a long time. But housing is a basic human need. Now, if I'm renting out multi-million-dollar houses, if there is a recession, the need for those is going to be less than when we're talking about your basic run-of-the-mill, normal blue-collar house. And so that's why I like to invest in those because it's a basic need like food and water. So should you be investing in single-family houses? Absolutely, and you should be doing it today.